Hello and welcome to another Into the Terminal. Today we're going to be talking about virtual machine things.
Yay, virtual machine things. I love virtual machine things.
Yeah, we were very uninventive in our episode of like 3 virtual machine things.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's fine. Virtual machine things, 3 of them. I think, a list of 3. It's good. It's good. It's easy to consume. It's good for people with short attention spans and really easy to cut up into smaller videos later. Total
Yeah,
coincidence though.
there you go. All right, well, why don't we jump into the terminal and Nate, you can get us going with some virtual machine things.
Sounds great. Maybe I'll start with my terminal demo instead of my GUI demo because I don't know. All right, so I know we said jump into the terminal, but now we're looking at web console. But what I want to show you is snapshotting. Scott, why do we snapshot VMs?
Uh, because we want to be able to return to their state later.
Right, exactly. Right. So maybe I'm doing system updates. Maybe I'm about to do an in-place upgrade or something. Right. And I really want to make sure I have a safe state to get this machine back to later. Right. So I have a very creatively named machine here called test machine, which I use for all kinds of testing purposes. And we're going to make a snapshot using the GUI in this case. Right. So inside a web console, there's a plugin called, I think it's called Cockpit Machines, that gives you a really nice interface for dealing with virtual machines. And I've used this before on the show, and you're going to see it quite a bit today as well. So if we go down here to this section that says snapshots, oddly enough, and we just click this nice blue button that says create snapshot, we're given a nice little window where we can give the snapshot a name and a description. We'll call it ITT167, and we click create. And that's actually all it takes from within the web UI to create a snapshot. And then if we wanted to go back and switch back to that snapshot, we click on this revert button, right? So you can see here I have a test machine snapshot from earlier today, and I have the one we just made, right? If I click revert on this older one, I can revert back to it simply by hitting revert and clicking the revert button, right? And then that takes us back to the state that we were in before we made any changes. Now, unfortunately, I haven't actually made any changes to this machine to demonstrate it, but you get the idea, right? The idea here is that it makes sort of a chain of snapshots. Now, I will warn you that it's good to maintain good hygiene with these snapshots. This varies based on however your particular virtualization infrastructure works. I've seen some that you can have a billion snapshots and it never blinks an eye. I've seen others that a very deep snapshot chain will eventually start to cause disk trouble. So just keep that in mind, right? But this is into the terminal. So I'm not going to just show you the GUI. I want to show you the power of what's behind the scenes on this particular host, which is a libvirt system running KVM on top of RHEL 9.6, right? And the cool thing is that you can do everything I just did via the command line instead of doing it in the GUI, right? I think command line is powerful for a couple of reasons. The GUI is great for, I just need to go get a thing done. But the command line is great for, I need to do that thing 100 times, or I need to do that thing every night at 2 a.m, right? So then you can script it. So it's good to know how to get this done that way. So there is a command line tool called Virsh, which we're going to use a couple times today. That is the virtual shell. That is the thing that talks to libvirt, which is like an API that's in front of KVM. And it'll tell libvirt, hey, I'd like to do a thing. And then libvirt knows how to tell KVM to do the thing, right? So Virsh, and we're going to use the subcommand snapshot create as, and there's a bunch of other snapshot subcommands. We're only going to touch on a couple of them today. And then we do -- domain, test machine. Domain is another word for what virtual machine are we talking about? What's our target virtual machine within libvirt here, right? So we do domain, test machine. Name, we're going to name the snapshot. We're going to call it test machine snap. I'm going to go with snap 2 because I already had a snap from my testing earlier. And then we're going to give it a description. Oop, ION, I don't know, another snapshot.
So I will say, I always use ISO dates for my name,
Sure.
exactly when it was made, and then
And
description is important, right? Because
yeah,
that gives you the context of like why you made the snapshot or what you would be reverting back to if you reverted to the snapshot.
right. And you might have noticed that when we did the snapshot in the GUI, the name that it automatically filled was exactly what you said. It was a date and time stamp. So it was really clear when this thing was created. So we're going to say go ahead and make that. And now we can look at what snapshots are on this machine with Virsh again. Virsh, we go snapshot dash list, and then we tell it what domain we're talking about. And you can see there's 3 snapshots on there. There's the one that we just took. There's the one I took earlier today. And you can see they do have a creation time associated with them in that metadata, right? It even tells us what state it was in when the snapshot was taken, which is also very important, right? If you're taking sort of an emergency snapshot, or I just need one right now because something is about to go downhill, then that'll tell you that it's on, right? And that could mean that there's quiesced data that ended up in that snapshot, right? So it's always safer to have your machine off when you're going to do a snapshot. I know that's not always possible. It does let you take a snapshot when it's on. And I've used that in lab cases and it's generally been fine. But if you've got like something that's writing a lot of data to disk and you take a snapshot right in the middle of it, not going to be a good day for you if you try to restore to that snapshot.
Yeah, most snapshots grab the disk, but they leave the in-memory
Right.
stuff that goes along with the machine. And so when Nate says quiesced data, he's talking about data that resides in RAM, which would evaporate or not be reflected in your snapshot
Right.
versus the actual written disk data.
Right, right. So that you may end up in a situation where your snapshot is actually dirtier than your running machine because your running machine has the ability to finish writing that stuff out to disk. So if you're going to take a snapshot, either make sure that things are written to disk. I believe there's a command in Linux. Was it flush? Is that the word I'm thinking
Sync,
of? Sync,
sync.
which will tell it write everything to disk. So if you really have to do it when you're online, maybe do that first, right? Make sure there's not something going on. Maybe stop services. I don't know, right? Just shut it down. Shut it down is better. All right, there's one more command I wanted to show you at the command line here, and that is snapshot info. And as you might guess, this is going to give us information about one of our snapshots. So if we do snapshot info, test machine, and just for fun, let's get info about the one we took in the web console, just to show you that they should be interchangeable because they're all done through libvirt. Okay. And this should tell us things like, is it the latest snapshot? What state was the machine in? Just some additional information about what it is. Oh, look, it even gives you the parent. Like I said, this is a snapshot chain, right? So test machine underscore snap existed before I took this second snapshot. So that's the parent. Sometimes that's really useful information if you're trying to reassemble that snapshot chain, right? But if I looked at test snap 2, it would say test snap is the parent of that one.
So we do have a couple of questions, Nate.
Sure.
For your stuff, are you using file-backed virtual machines or are you using logical volume-backed virtual machines?
So these are all QCOW2s, and that is actually something I did want to touch on before we started this conversation and then forgot about. It really depends. libvirt cannot snapshot every format of disk. QCOW is one of them that it can. I believe flat images it cannot, although I could be wrong on that. I haven't used those in a long time. And I think it can do LVM backed. I'm pretty sure it can. I know that was a thing that Red Hat Virtualization used to do a lot. So I assume it can. I haven't tried it because I don't have a libvirt backed storage domain for, or not libvirt, LVM backed storage domain for this particular machine.
Cool. Sorry to interrupt your demo.
Yeah, no problem. I'm almost to the end. There is a snapshot revert command, but since I already reverted once, I don't know what's going to happen if I try to do this now. But hey, it's a test machine. Let's find out. Here, let me get us back to the top of the screen first. So if we do a vir, and then we just need to give it the name of the snapshot to revert to. There we go. It reverts it, right? And now if I were to start up that machine, it would be in whatever state it was in when I did snap number 2.
Very nice. So some things that we would recommend using snapshots before you do. I think updates are an excellent time to take a snapshot before you apply
Yeah,
them. That way, if something goes cattywampus with your updates, you can very easily revert to your pre-update state.
right.
If you're relying on things like DNF history to revert individual RPM transactions, that can be a little bit more hairy. So if you're on virtual machines doing a snapshot and reverting that snapshot is very direct. Before you do anything drastic to the box, like I know on a couple of these, we've done like in-place upgrades using the leap
Yeah,
utility. I'm 100% doing a snapshot before I execute that non-reversible activity on
absolutely.
my machine.
Yeah. The great
Um,
thing about the snapshots is they're outside of the operating system. So it doesn't have to be a Linux guest that you're snapshotting. It doesn't have to be a guest that supports snapshots by itself, right? You could have a Windows guest. Heck, it's like an OS2 warp machine you're running for fun, right? You could snapshot that at the virtualization layer and still revert that snapshot, which is really handy.
yeah, and then you could also use this as a quick and dirty backup, right? Where you take a snapshot periodically so that you know that what files are there. So if somebody were to like roll in and delete a bunch of files, you have a snapshot where those files exist that you can revert to. So there's
Right.
a couple different ways that you can utilize snapshots to help you out in your administrative exercises. So Nate, should I show them the other virtualization?
Sure thing.
So the other virtualization that we came up with today, which seems to have gone away.
Oh
Excellent.
no. It's gone walkabout.
Yeah. Fun. Is VirtualBox, right? So a reason we talk about VirtualBox is because it's a pretty commonly used, freely available virtualization solution that runs on a bunch of different things. So I think if you're like new to Linux, this might be how you are new to Linux. You're running VMs or something like that on top of another operating system. And snapshots work very similarly to how they did with Vert's cockpit-based virtual machines. So I have this Fedora 42 box running here, and I can highlight it, and I can just say take a snapshot. And today is 07/11/2025. All right. And it'll go ahead and make that snapshot. And then I can go on the machine and do a DNF upgrade and update all my RPMs. And if something's weird, I can now revert to the snapshot that we have taken. So here I'm using it more as kind of like a before drastic system changes insurance.
Right.
I have a couple that I've done in the past, like this one. No, this one. So here this was a RHEL 8 box that I did a leap upgrade to. And so here, if I reverted back my snapshot by just clicking on it and hitting restore, and I'll just use a poor poor name because I want it to be quick, it'll revert the machine back and I'll be able to boot it up and it'll be actually a RHEL 8 box now. So I may want to go over and change its name as well to indicate that it's a RHEL 8 box that's now present on this system. Yeah, so that's how you do snapshots in VirtualBox. It's fairly straightforward with the graphical user interface they provide.
In chat, another point was brought up about when not to snapshot or when to be careful with a snapshot. And I asked for clarification, but I think I understand the question. And that is some applications like directories that are, that have like master or not master, but like the main directory server, and then there's sync replications across the network. A lot of times they maintain sort of a state, right? And if you were to snapshot one of those things and then revert it, now it's behind on that state, right? And some applications are unhappy with that, like clustered applications, or like I said, a directory deployment like that. If there was more to that question, DSOU7XM, please let us know, and we'll try to clarify more.
Well, and that's a spot where doing offline snapshots may actually work out better,
right?
Because usually the machine will coordinate that at boot time when it's coming onto the network and doing the network things.
Because it's just like it's off at that point, and then when it comes back up, it will bring itself back up to speed with where it's supposed to be in the directory. So yeah.
But yeah, it's a great idea to kind of be aware of some of these weirdnesses versus online snapshots versus offline snapshots. Offline snapshots, of course, are if you're in a very uptime focused environment, they're not going to be super keen on offline snapshots out, but maybe you just need to schedule some maintenance windows to execute those. So that you can do it during your maintenance window, and that's not a big deal because they're already expecting interruptions in the services provided by that virtual machine. All right, Nate, should we hear from today's sponsor?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Who's today's sponsor, Scott?
Today's sponsor is Scam as a Service. We're all familiar with SaaS, software as a service, but did you know that Scam as a Service is redefining what SaaS is? Scam as a Service offers expertly curated, artisanally crafted scams, as opulently fantastic as any you can find on the internet. If you want to give your money to a scammer, you could choose from classics like the deposed royal or government official who can't access their trapped wealth. Or perhaps you prefer the good old copied website on a slightly misspelled domain name scam. bankofamerica.com, anyone? Perhaps random texts to drive engagement. Scam as a Service has those too. So if you're going to get scammed by scammers, you might as well be scammed by the best scams on Scam as a Service. Visit today at scamasaservice.com. So there you go.
I feel like our sponsors are going downhill, Scott. Are we not getting the buy-in? Is that the problem?
Nate, honestly, you changed your beard color, and I think that messed with the sponsors.
Oh, you think they like blue better?
Yeah, or red. That was a great one. One with the whole red hat theme.
Well, I'm getting a lot of people telling me I should keep this color until after Christmas. So I don't know. Maybe you guys can expect worse and worse sponsors until after Christmas.
Are you going to decorate it and like hang some ornaments from it?
Yeah, I could make it like a Christmas tree.
A reverse Christmas tree?
Yeah. It's got like the shape already, right? Yeah.
Awesome. So what else do we have coming up for virtual machine stuff?
So we have some more common tasks like installation, like installing a new virtual machine, cloning virtual machines, which is different than snapshotting virtual machines, and things like installing from ISOs. Let's see. Oh, and the good old fancy, just like I want to make my VM different than it is today. So editing your VMs, like adding memory, CPU, things like that.
Awesome. Well, where do you want to start first, Nate?
Well, let's see. The next thing I've got in my list is importing a VM from a virtual disk file. So there's a couple reasons you might do this. Let's say you're moving a virtual machine from one platform to another. Or for me, More commonly, I've got like a template of a machine that I want to use to build new machines from, right? So what I do is I go to our hosted image builder service, and every so often I make a new image, and that becomes the base for my virtual machines that I build out at home, which are mostly lab systems, right? So sometimes I need to be able to spin up a lab system really quickly and easily. So I have some scripts that I wrote that use some tools to just make a copy of that disk image and instantiate it. But I'm going to show you the manual method, and then I'm actually going to show you the command line that's behind the same script that I was just talking about, that you can do this from the command line as well. So you see right here, there's a button in the cockpit machines view here that says import VM. I click import VM. Now this is going to assume I already have this VM disk image on my hypervisor, whether that's local storage or some network attached thing. In my case, it's an iSCSI disk, right? So it's effectively, it looks like a local disk. So we're going to give it a name. We'll just call it imported VM. No, you know what? We're going to name it so I can find it more easily later. ITT 167 dash, I don't know, we'll go with 1. Right? Then we're going to tell it where to find the disk image we're going to import. Now, important thing to keep in mind, the disk image we use is the disk image that will be associated with this VM after it's created, right? So you don't want to point this to your template. You want to point it to a copy of your template if you're in fact doing the templating mechanism that I was talking about before. So var libvirt. Oh, tab doesn't work. Images, and then I've got an ITT 167-1 QCOW right here ready to go. Now this is an image that I literally built this morning out of Image Builder, right? We have to give it an operating system because it's not able to read what operating system is installed inside of this image. So we're just going to say Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10.0, 2 gig of memory, that'll be fine. And then we're going to click import and run. And there's also an import and edit button there if you'd like to make some changes to it that weren't in that wizard before it comes up and starts running. But now that we've clicked on that import and run button, we should have an ITT 167-1 right here. And it's already booted, right? So that's how quickly the thing will come up because it didn't have to go through an installation process, which is why it's nice to use templates, right? I can spin up a new virtual machine really quickly, and I could have some customizations baked into this image right out of the bat. Maybe there's agents that my corporation cares about. Maybe there's just like, my automation user has to be baked into the system, or services that I really care about, or configurations that are really important to me that are just, they're so important that I want to have them right inside of the base image. Now, of course, we can do that with the command line as well. So let me hop back over to a terminal here. And for that, I'm going to do copy paste because this is a much longer command line here. So let me copy this. Now, there's also another thing I want to talk about, and I'll talk about this as we go through the command line I'm going to paste in here. Please tell me paste works. Good. Okay. So virt install is, and I got virt install twice at the beginning here. Copy paste failure, I suppose. There we go. Virt install is an extra tool that comes along with libvirt that does exactly what it sounds like. It will start a virtualization, a virtual machine installation. Now you can tell it to install from an ISO if you want to, but the example I have here is to import a disk like we did in the GUI there just a minute ago. So virt install, we give it a name. We're going to call this one ITT 167-2, right? Because I'm really creative with my names. We're going to give it 4 gig of memory. Again, just kind of off the top of my head number. We're going to give it 2 vCPUs. These are things you have to specify. Otherwise, it's going to probably give you an error saying it needs this data before you can run the thing. We're going to tell it what variant to run. Sometimes you don't have to specify this, but it's always a good idea because there's sometimes nuance that libvirt is aware of for these different operating system variations that it has to account for. Things like what CPU architecture it really cares about for this particular guest, right? Or baselines on how much CPU and memory that particular guest is going to need. This -- import flag tells it we're going to be importing a disk. And And then, of course, we have to tell it what disk we want to import. And I have a second copy of that same disk image right here, the 167-2.qcal. This auto console thing simply tells it, normally when you run virt install, it'll immediately bring you to a terminal-based console, which is fine if you care about that. But I do these things unattended when I run them. So I turn the auto console off, right? That's up to you if you want it off or not. Just drop that if you don't want it off. And I'm going to actually show you an extra interesting thing that you can do with virt install. And that is I'm going to give it a cloud-init file. Now, if you're not familiar with cloud-init is a way to pass in things like user information or services you want started or stopped, or a couple other kind of baseline configurations that you're probably going to want baked into your system when it first comes up. This is really commonly used when you're deploying an instance on a cloud environment, which is why it's called cloud-init to begin with. The system actually has a service called cloud-init that'll start at boot time, and it'll look for metadata that libvirt knows enough on how to pass into the virtual machine. Your cloud environment, of course, will also know how to pass that in, right? And the file is just like a flat text. I think it's TOML, if I remember correctly. It might not be. Maybe it's INI based. But you can give it things like, add this user, give it an SSH key, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to pass in the same user data file that I use when I build my own lab machines, right? Just to show you sort of the example. And what that'll do is, as it spins up this machine, it'll attach that metadata. And then when the machine boots, cloud-init will see the metadata and run the things that are in there. And I can show you what's in there while that thing boots up. I keep it inside of my images directory just so I can find it easily in the future. Right, and you can see it's going to add a user named Nate. It's going to give it it's going to put it inside a wheel. It's going to set a sudo rule for that user, right, to allow them to do things. It's going to give it my authorized key for SSH, right? And I have another one up here for Ansible, right? So if I want to run an Ansible playbook against this machine, I've already baked in an Ansible user so that I can, hit these machines up. Now, these are things you could do in the image too, right? So I'm just kind of showing you two ways that you could get these things done. There's other stuff you can do with cloud-init as well. All right, so now that that thing is spun up, if I go back over to virtual machines, we should have a 167-2 now as well. All right, there we go, 167-2, and there it is. It's already booted up as well. So those are, that's just a good way to kind of use a templating system, if you will, in order to spin up new machines that are predictably defined, right? So they're going to come up with either a very similar or identical configuration based on how you're, obviously that cloud-init could make variations happen for you, or you could come in with automation later and complete the configuration.
So Nate, there was a question about Kickstart in the chat.
Uh-huh.
And yes, you can pass a Kickstart file to your virt install command.
Mm-hmm.
There's an option so that you can specify what file name to use.
Yep. You can also do virt installs off of Pixie environments, if I recall. Yeah, you can do Pixie environments. So you can have it go and get a Pixie boot. You can spin up a machine that goes into a Pixie boot environment and gets Kickstart that way as well, right? So that was something I did really commonly in my last job as a systems administrator. I had Satellite set up to do a Pixie environment and do installations that way. And it's a lot more convenient than even this is, right? Because you can define that stuff in the Pixie environment, and then it just happens when you turn it on.
Yep. One of the nice things about the Virsh tools and virt install that Nate's showing you is that because they're command line driven, notice that you just type your command and hit enter and it does things, which means you could script it. You can include it in your own custom made tooling. So as you're building out this catalog of commands that you work with when running on something like a KVM host, you could start to build some scripts to help you with automating that work. And then there is in the Ansible Galaxy, there's some working with KVM Ansible. I think there's an Ansible role, but there's other Ansible content too for automating a lot of these activities.
It's one of those things that because of the way I run my home lab, I have wanted to look into libvirt Ansible automation and just have never taken the time to do it. I'm told it exists, and that's as much as I know.
Yes, it does exist, but it is a community driven set of stuff, which is why it's an Ansible Galaxy. I don't know that it's shipped with automation platform or any Red Hat
Yeah, that I'm not sure
officially
about.
supported products.
Definitely not sure about that. I do have one more way of installing a new machine, and that is more similar to the Kickstart method. Now, in this case, I'm not using a Pixie environment. I'm not technically using my own Kickstart, but the same image that I just deployed as QCOW, I asked Image Builder to make me an ISO file, which bakes in a Kickstart file, right? So that it'll do a mostly automated installation. So I figured I'd show you that as well. This one, I'm not going to do both the command line and the user and the GUI here because I didn't look up the command line arguments I need to pass an ISO in through virt install, although I know it's possible because I used to do it. All right, we're going to call this one ITT 167. I think, I don't know, -3 is the next one in my series here. And you see there's options here for, you can tell it to download an operating system, use a cloud-based image. There's all kinds of interesting options here. If I tell it to download an OS, it can actually go to the Red Hat customer portal and get the ISO for whatever version of RHEL I want to install. And I think that's a pretty cool feature. I don't use it much, but it's neat that it exists. Okay, so we're going to do local installation with an ISO, and then we have to give it a path to the ISO. I put them all inside of my ISOs directory here, and I made an ITT 167 ISO. We're going to select that one. This will automatically read from that ISO, if it can, what operating system we're installing. So you can see it automatically said it's RHEL 10. So that was handy. I didn't have to define that. It's going to make me a new QCOW image for the disk. I don't think 10 gigabytes is going to be big enough. We're going to make that 20 gigabytes. And again, I'll leave it at 2 gig of memory. And then again, you got that create and edit button if you want to change it, but I'm going to click create and run. Now it goes into the background immediately. Now I got to go find my virtual machine that it just made and get to the console because it's waiting for me to answer questions, right? So I don't want it to do a media check. I just want it to do the installation. That's the whole reason I wanted to be fast. I'm sure anyone who's ever installed RHEL from an ISO knows the rush to try to get there before it does the media check, because otherwise you're just wasting time. You're like, I'm pretty sure it's a fine image. Now, for whatever reason, in my testing when I did this, it needs me to specify the disk. And I think I could muck around with the Kickstart file to fix that, but I just didn't want to take the time to do that for this demo. So I'm just going to basically select the disk and click done, and it's going to automatically do partitioning. And if I click this begin installation button, it's just going to do the thing for me. And if we were to sit here and watch it for the next, I don't know, 15, 10 minutes, it'll do the whole installation and bring me up to the first boot. And it'll be basically just like that QCOW file that we had deployed from. It should feel identical if we log into the machine because they were built from the same template. All right. And that's my ISO installation demonstration. Any questions come through while I was rambling on? I see a bunch of conversation you guys are having in there.
Yeah, we were chit-chatting about templates versus fresh installs.
I actually prefer fresh installs depending on your environment as well. My home lab just isn't really outfitted for it. If I had the infrastructure, I would be doing Pixie builds like I did with satellite, but there's just no reason for me to run a satellite in my home lab. I don't have enough systems to manage. Every time I've tried to do it, I just ended up with one more thing that I had to keep updated. And yeah, it doesn't make sense for my home lab. But yes, in a large enough deployment, I like installations over templates as well.
And I think Shantanu said the same. Kanan Kudu said the same. I said the same. But
Yeah.
I will say that every virtualization admin that I've worked with, when I describe the build process that way, they look at me like I have three heads because they live in the world of templates and templating and cloning from the template.
Yeah, and I mean, in my last role, I wore many hats. I was the systems guy. I was also the virtualization guy. I was like half of our storage team as well, right? And I don't know. Maybe it's just a mindset, right? Maybe as an operating system person, you feel like it's cleaner I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it, but I've always liked kickstarts and installations better than templates as well. Just feels cleaner to me. I don't know.
All right. And then, yeah, so I think that kind of runs us off the edge there. Nate, the image builder one, I think it answers all the questions on its own, right? So it just builds all the way through as a kickstart.
Yeah,
Normally, if you,
all I had to do was give it the disk because for whatever reason the Kickstart file or the Kickstart automation wasn't smart enough to figure out what disk it was supposed to install to. So I had to confirm that, and then I clicked the continue button, and then it did the rest of it automatically and left me with a reboot button at the end. I just had to hit that. And those are things you can change within the Kickstart file, but you'd have to take the ISO and unpack it and modify the Kickstart and then rebuild the ISO. And that just, I didn't want to take the time to do that before today's episode.
yeah. Well, and just a general note, if you are missing commands in your kickstart, like you don't put in the root password or the keyboard,
Yeah.
it will ask you those questions because those are required things for it to do the kickstart, which means that if you're trying to make something that's kind of like self-installable, but you do have to ask the user who's installing it a couple of questions, you could do that through conveniently forgetting a couple of the answers in the kickstart, and then it'll prompt the user sitting at the terminal or the
Right.
keyboard to put those things in.
So there we go. My system is up and running. I'm able to run top. That means it's perfect, right?
Perfect enough. How about that?
Perfect enough.
Yeah. So we could go through and show like adding a machine in VirtualBox, but I think there's a lot of like YouTube videos on doing that. So I don't know that that's a great use of our time today.
All
As we're
right.
starting to
Well,
get
I mean,
towards the end of the hour.
the next thing I had was about cloning. So we can go into cloning.
Yeah, let's do
Got to be
that.
careful with clones, though, because if you clone the wrong guy, you end up with a whole army of mercenaries instead of good soldiers, right?
But that's why we have Order 66.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So, again, we can do clones two ways. Let's clone the guy we just made. In fact, I should probably shut him down before I clone him. I don't know that you have to, but I'm going to. I think it's right in this little hamburger menu, a little dot menu. Yep, right here. We can just go clone, right? So, right, we're in Cockpit Systems right here, and this is the machine I just made, ITT 167-3. Click on the little dots here and click clone. And this is actually really simple, right? It even automatically gives it a name of 167-3-clone. If I click the button, it's going to magically make us a clone. It even gives us the output right here, which you'll see in a minute when I do the command line. That's literally the output you get from virt clone, which is the the command line equivalent of this tool. And it went, unless I accidentally clicked the cancel button. No, I didn't. It went faster than it thought it would. So yay for progress bars. And there we go. There's 167-3-clone, right? But I like to do these things from the command line. And this is actually how we did templating. Instead of having a disk image that we imported, we had machines we called clone me, right? And we had different clone me's for different purposes, right? And we would use virt clone to clone the machine that we, like if I'm building a web server, we had a clone me for web servers, or we had a clone me for RHEL 6 and another one for RHEL 7, because this is the era we were talking about. I would use virt clone to make a new machine. But what you have to do, though, is make sure that the machine you're cloning, right? This is something that virt clone doesn't do for you. You have to make sure the machine you're cloning has its identifying information stripped out of it, right? Or the machine that you've cloned, you're going to have to go in and clean up identifying information, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up with two machines with like the same MAC address, or two machines with the same SSH host key, two machines with the same UDEV rules, even though maybe they have different underlying hardware, right? So these are all things that you're going to have to go in and clean up, or you're going to have to make a sanitized and sealed machine as your source machine, right? That's what we did. We made these clone me machines, and then we would seal them, right, by cleaning out all that identifying information. And then you would never turn that machine on. You would just use it as a source for a clone, right? All right, so let me show you the command line. And this one's actually pretty simple, except the command line arguments are oddly named because they're going to feel odd to you, and you'll understand why in a second. Vert-clone, and then we do -o, which you would think would be output, because most commands -o is where am I outputting to? No, this is original. -o is original in vert-clone. So -o, yes, sysprep is the thing. Yes, Shantanu, sysprep is the command that, or one of the things you would use to seal those systems. Vert-clone -o, and then we give it the name of the machine we want to clone. Now, this would be a machine that is defined and usable within libvirt, right? So if I haven't showed you a versh list, but if I do a versh list, it'll show me all the running machines. Versh list dash -a, or sorry, -all. I did have it right the first time. Will show me all the defined machines, right? And of course, the machine I wanted to clone is still turned on, I think. No, it isn't. I'll use -3 because that's the one that's turned off. So if I do vert -clone -o, not Chloe, clone, we're going to do ITT 167-3. And then -n is the new name, right? Because, we already used -o, so we can't make output. It has to be -n for new. We're going to call it ITT-167-3-clone2, I guess. And now the one big difference here is when we did this in the GUI, remember all I had to do was give it a name and click go? That's because it automatically generates a disk name for me. And the virtual machine GUI in Cockpit makes a lot of assumptions like that for you, especially for things like naming disks. Vert-clone, versh, they don't. They make you specify these things. So we have to do a -f for where we want the disk file to live, and that'll be in var libvirt. I guess we'll just call it, images ITT 167-3-clone2.qcow2. Okay, and that's all we really have to tell it. Here we go. Now it's going to go through that same procedure where it's going to make us another clone. And after that clone is finished, we should see it inside of the versh list that I showed earlier. Any questions while we wait for this status bar to go across? I see JScar talking about potatoes for some reason.
No, but I did want to touch on clones versus snapshots.
Sure.
So the big difference is that when you clone a machine, you're making a new and distinct machine that is a copy of the original. So, snapshots, you have one machine with multiple states that you can switch that one machine to, right? So the snapshot goes with the machine. Whereas a clone, you're making a copy that you intend to manage as a separate entity.
Some platforms will let you take a snapshot and make a clone from the snapshot as well. I don't know that libvirt can do that. Well, I think I know that it can. I don't know how to do it without a management UI that does it for me, because I didn't see that as an easy option. Certainly not within Cockpit machines, but I know like Red Hat Virtualization used to do it, which is all libvirt backed. But it may have done it something in the background with LVM stuff to make that happen. But anyway,
Right.
I think
And
VMware does that for you too, and I don't know about VirtualBox if that'll let you clone from a snapshot.
I could see. Yes, it will let you clone from a snapshot.
Yeah, some do, some don't. So maybe I'll say most do, and maybe there's a way to do it in libvirt, and I just don't know. It's not a thing I do that often. So,
well, realize that you said Red Hat Virtualization used to do it, and that's because Red Hat Virtualization used, by default, it used logical volumes as the backing store for all your VMs, right? So, essentially, if you're doing a snapshot or cloning from a snapshot, you would just read through the snapshot to the original disk, plus any changes that were stored in the snapshot. So you're able to accumulate what the disk for that machine looks like for your clone without disturbing the machine itself.
There's my clone. I was wondering where my clone was. It's because I put another dash in the name. It's ITT-167. I'm like, where did the clone? It just made a liar of me. But no, there it is. I just didn't name it right. So there we go. There's our new clone. We have two clones of 167-3 because we did one in the GUI and then we did the other one using virtclone.
Yeah, and for VirtualBox, the cloning is a little bit weird. Let me switch over to VB here. Because if you look in all of the like machine settings and other stuff, there's no option to clone. Right up here on the top, it's talking about snapshots and properties and whatnot. And if you go to machine menu, right, there's nothing in here that says clone either. And that's because to clone a machine with VirtualBox, you right click on it in the menu of machines, and that's where you find clone. It's in the like right click context menu. But you can just select it and then it asks you what you want to call it. And a couple of options for doing things like keeping MAC addresses content the same or different. So it's trying to do some of that sysprepping and templating that Nate was talking about kind of on the fly before it makes the cloned system.
That's handy.
So yeah, there it is. It's copying the machine and it'll show up in my list with the, because this one is called RHEL 9 next clone. It'll be called RHEL 9 next clone.
Ah, good. And your status bar is a lot nicer than mine.
Well, you know, it's a fancy graphical server with GUI, man.
Server with GUI. So Rick brought up a good point about snapshots not necessarily being a backup, and I don't know if it's worth hammering that home again, right? That a snapshot is more like a safety net. You could call it a backup, but it's not really meant to be a long-term backup. It's really meant to be a point in time that you want to be able to fall back to if needed. If you needed an individual file out of that snapshot, not as easy to get as if you had just performed a server backup using an actual backup utility, right? So,
yeah,
something to keep in mind. Don't say Nate and Scott said snapshots are backups, and that's why I'm looking for a job today. So,
all right, Nate. I don't think we have anything else on our list today.
I mean, just editing VMs, which pretty
yes,
forward stuff. Here, we'll just open up one of my VMs if you want to bring my screen share back up. This is how you would do it inside of the web console, right? You just open up one of the VMs, and here it is. This is the same place I would have found the console. That would show up over here when the machine is running, but this one's off. But you can just edit the memory by clicking edit, get a nice little slider. You can even give it like overcommit, or not overcommit. You can give it extra memory that you can balloon into. That's the word I'm looking for. If you wanted to, right? You can assign more CPUs. You can even tell it kind of the architecture, not architecture, but the layout of those CPUs, whether you have several cores versus sockets. And honestly, this is more important for like licensing reasons, I think, than it is for actual performance in a virtual machine. Maybe you can tell me I'm wrong, Scott, but that's the way I always saw it.
I think for licensing of software, because most places will license by socket. Although more recently, I've started seeing people license by core, so that may be important.
Right.
But it'll also do things like on the hypervisor layer. When this virtual machine is running, it tries to put all of the cores on the same die of the hypervisor, because that way it can get things like CPU cache. Whereas if you have the cores assigned to this VM on different CPU sockets, now they don't get to share that cache because it's split between different CPUs. So there is some like backend stuff that the operating system kind of, or I should say KVM, tries to figure out for you to make it nice.
Well, that's handy then. I learned something today. Good.
Yeah. And then one other thing that I don't know that we've ever talked about for KVM. Have we ever talked about kernel same page merging?
I don't think we have.
Okay. So this is something that is that happens for KVM implementations on Red Hat distros. So it's called KSM, or kernel same page merging. And the idea is that if you're running multiple virtual machine instances, like maybe Nate has 3 RHEL 9s running on this box.
That's impossible.
Right. They all have a RHEL 9 kernel. They all have a RHEL 9 glibc. They all have, RHEL 9 Apache. So we could have 3 instances of all of that stuff stored in the hypervisor RAM. But what kernel same page merging does is on the hypervisor level, it looks at what's stored in the memory pages and then will collapse down ones that are identical between virtual machines.
Right.
And so it's the same thing that we do with like shared memory, or I should say shared object libraries and process space on a machine, but done at the hypervisor level, looking at the VMs. And that's really handy where you can actually shrink down the memory footprint of your machines, because as long as they're the same version of the operating system, a lot of the stuff's the same.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you had 100 VMs, all of them on the same kernel, and I don't know, complete not nonsensical number off the top of my head, say that that's 500 megabytes of memory per machine that you've now deduplicated, right? That adds up quick.
Right. And it looks at individual pages of RAM. So even if they're not running the same kernels, if they're using the same libpam,
right,
then that libpam will be deduplicated across all of them. This also works on Windows guests. So if you're running Windows guests on top of KVM on a Red Hat distro, it'll KSM it as well. And then the one weirdness that is starting to creep up here is we're starting to do technologies at the CPU layer to essentially encrypt virtual machine memory.
Right.
And so if you're using something like, what is it? TSX, I'm going to forget what the right CPU flag is, but
You're talking
Intel
about
and
like
AMD,
confidential computing level stuff.
Yeah, it's a CPU flag that both Intel and AMD have a version of, and essentially what it says is that the locally running hypervisor CPUs are going to use encryption for looking at virtual machine memory. And that way, the hypervisor can't actually introspect what is stored in the memory of virtual machines running on top of it. Well, if the hypervisor can no longer figure out that it's the same things on these machines, then kernel same page merging stops working. So,
because it doesn't know they're the same because they're encrypted.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so if you were oversubscribing your hypervisors, expecting to save memory because they're all identical, but then you implement one of these trusted computing features where we're encrypting what's stored there, realize that all of a sudden everybody's going to need their full amount of memory because we're not allowed to figure out what's identical between them and lean it down.
Right. All right. So of course, other things you might edit, right? Like the network adapter, the disk, right? If you want to insert that ISO file to get data off of it or reboot and reinstall this machine, you use the disks here. Click this insert button and you can tell it what ISO to map. You can even pass through hardware from the virtualization host, which is handy sometimes. I have one case where I've got my Home Assistant machine. It needs a radio for some of the stuff that it has to talk to, and it's a little USB plug that's plugged into the back of the hypervisor. I pass that through to the guest, and now it thinks it has it plugged directly into it, which is really, really neat. These are things that, 15 years ago we're like, what? How? No, it's virtual. There's a line between that. You can't do that. And of course, this stuff can all be done on the command line as well. I'm not going to go in depth there. I'll just show you what it looks like if I do a versh edit on ITT. I don't know. We'll do 167-3 again. It's all XML, so it's ugly. But once you learn what these blocks mean, and once you learn the formatting for this stuff, it's actually pretty intuitive. I used to do all of my virtual machine edits using versh before we went to Red Hat Virtualization because I was using libvirt for everything, and we didn't have a nice GUI like web console back then, back when you had to walk uphill both ways to get to school, right? So, anyway, I like libvirt. I think it's a great platform. That's why I talk about it so much on shows like Into the Terminal. I think it's a good alternative for folks who are just doing, single host virtualization. So it's good stuff.
All right.
And
And
that, I think, is that, Scott. We're almost at time anyway.
I agree. So join us next week for another Into the Terminal. Like last week, we don't know what it is yet, but we will
It'll
meet
be
on Monday and
something.
figure it out.
And, obviously more further down the hill of sponsorships. Maybe we'll be like selling things on the dark web next time.
Oh man, we'll be scraping the barrel of sponsors. Whew, I don't know who makes contact with all those sponsors, Nate, but they need to step up their game.
We need to hire someone better to do that stuff. It's almost like we're just making these things up and we're running out of ideas.
I mean, that couldn't possibly be it. So we will see you again for Into the Terminal next week. But soon we're going to have a week off. I think we have 2 more weeks, and then we're going to have a week off because of American Thanksgiving.
Oh, things are going to be, I think, pretty crazy the next 2 months because I've got some PTO coming up. I don't know if you do or not. We have time off granted by Red Hat. Yeah, things are going to be spotty.
Yeah. So as we start to get closer, and we'll be telling you guys when we're not going to be making episodes for whichever week. But next week we will be here. So we will see you then, and we'll have another great Linux Into the Terminal episode for you.
And more
Bye,
sponsors. Have a great one.